All good. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, everyone, for joining. My name is Wendy Engel. I lead WWF's Sustainable Finance team. I'm joined this morning by our implementing partners, Share and NVI, together with our ESG advisory group and our panel of speakers that I'll join or introduce shortly. So thanks to all of you who've joined. We've got a really great turnout today, representation across the financial sector from asset managers, banks, insurance companies, and also really great to see that many of you are pretty much aware of what's happening in the South African agricultural sector. From our pre-survey webinar, we see that about 90% of you rate that you've got a really good understanding of the climate change impacts of South African agriculture, and also that about 60% of you have some level of awareness of the current climate agri-finance instruments that are out there. So really looking forward to all of you joining today. We were hoping to share our welcome video from our Sustainable Finance website, but I ran into a little bit of technical issues. So we'll just share that link a little bit later. I'll ask my colleagues Katanya and Nikki to just share that link, and you're welcome to have a look at that later. So the house rules for this morning, we'll just ask you to keep your audio muted. We've got about an hour and a half, so your questions, please share that in the chat function. We will have some time after each speaker for a Q&A, and we'll take those questions from the chat. We've got a post-webinar survey at the end, and we invite you to complete that as well. Thanks so much. So let's start off with just giving you some background as to the Climate and Sustainable Investment project. So I mentioned that the implementation partners are WWF South Africa, National Business Initiative, and Just Share. And essentially, the project is aimed at helping to support you to build your capacity around integrating both climate risks and the opportunities into your decision making so that we can see greater action in terms of climate change. We are funded by the Lewis Foundation that makes this project and our work possible. And so just in terms of our goals, the 5 key focus areas. First is looking at financial governance, so to support you to align your investment mandates and practice, looking at how your internal systems are better aligned to track climate investment, improving your skills and awareness, looking at improving your knowledge and access to resource. We'll share that link to our website where there are quite a lot of reports, thought leaders, pieces. There are also some videos and also the agri report that I will share with you later. We're also looking to support you in terms of your climate compliance, to look at your improved capital allocation for greater mitigation and resilience, and then just to help us get closer to achieving our goals. So on the agenda today, we've got, as I mentioned, myself, I'll just start sharing with you shortly our key recommendations from our agriculture report. We then have 3 speakers. We have Brett, co-founder and CEO of Mzanzi Meat. We've got Nick van Schalkwyk, a director from Restore Africa Funds, and we've got Zaan Meyer from Nedbank CIB that's going to talk to us on Shade Net Finance. So let me just start off with giving you an introduction in terms of what we want to share with you in terms of our agricultural report. I hope that many of you have had a chance to read it. It's available on our website. But essentially, the mandate or to our team or brief was to look at the status quo. So what is the current climate finance or funding gap in South Africa to support the agricultural sector to be able to mitigate and adapt to climate change? Following on from that, we looked at what are the specific challenges to achieve greater development of financial instruments and mechanisms. And we looked at venture capital, banks, insurance, and the financial services sector. Then our third main focus area was innovative financial solutions, and we looked at where are the current existing financial mechanisms and solutions. And I must admit that our team was really inspired to see what is out there, and I'll share that with you a little bit later. So let's begin. When we started at the problem framing, we looked at agricultural finance as a start. So before we even started looking at climate change finance to the agricultural sector. So what we discovered that agriculture in South Africa is underfunded. So there is not only a climate finance gap, but there's also an agri-finance gap. And so there's an opportunity now to use the climate finance that's available to support our action on climate change and then address this underfunding in the agricultural sector. If we look at the status quo in terms of financing agriculture, the largest share of South Africa's farming debt is currently held by commercial banks, followed by the Land Bank. We did see that there's some venture capital investment in the agri and food sector, largely focused on scaling mature businesses. There's definitely a low appetite for investment in the primary agricultural sector and low investment levels from institutional investors. If we then look at the future and the climate finance that we need to achieve, I'm going to share with you some of the results around the instruments, where we see the innovation, what types of models are working, and the enabling conditions needed for investment. So if we start at the adaptation and mitigation to climate change, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide now, being aware that many of you are quite au fait with the impact on South African agriculture. We know that the sector contributes about 13% to total carbon emissions, and the Boston Consulting Group, together with the National Business Initiative, have put together a very robust research document which outlines the climate pathways for a just transition, which focused on different sectors, and I will just share a little bit here in terms of the agricultural sector. So they segmented the sector into field crops, horticulture, livestock, and forestry, and over there you'll see the key recommendations in terms of what are the kind of adaptation, mitigation, and just transition pathways that we need for the sector. And that is to address the specific impacts for field crops, horticulture, and livestock that are predicted to be severely impacted by climate change. So then if we look at the climate finance and the status quo of what's currently funding, the two reports that are most often quoted in terms of what is the quantum of climate finance needed for South Africa is the World Bank and IFC studies. And they estimate that we need 8.9 trillion over a 15-year period from 2015 to 2030. And that translates to 596 billion to achieve the South African NDCs. Then the Climate Policy Initiative did a very good study tracking the annual climate finance in South Africa. It's the only study to our knowledge, and they estimated for the year 2017 to 2018 that the total amount of climate finance flowing in South Africa was 62 billion, and of that you'll see very little was flowing to the agricultural sector, only 3%. So if you look at those graphics on the slide over there, you'll see that there's definitely, or the majority of the finance is going to mitigation, to clean energy, and very little to the AFOLU, the agricultural and forestry and land use change sector. So as far as we know, there's no tracking of the climate finance flows from the private financial sector. This is a gap that we identified. So if any of you on the call are aware of that, of studies that have taken place, we didn't come across any, even in our stakeholder engagement with the finance sector. So then if we look at the global trends, in terms of where are the investment opportunities, because this was one of the key challenges that was presented to us in our stakeholder engagement, is that there's very little understanding of what the market opportunities are in the sector. We relied largely on the Ag Funder global reports, and we're able to do some trend analysis from 2019 to 2022. And you'll see those are the key sectors where there is growth and opportunity. We saw that the ag biotech currently is receiving about 23% of the investment. If we look at novel farming, which Zon Meyer, which will share with us a little bit later, the finance product, we're looking at about 20% of the market share. Innovative food, which includes cultured meat, that's also quite low at about 4%. Brett will share with us a little bit later. And then regenerative agriculture, which also would be included in novel farming. We're going to have Nick sharing a little bit more detail with us later. So if we look at the challenges that are preventing or inhibiting the sector to deliver on climate finance, here you will just get a little bit of a snapshot. So firstly, what we encountered is that asset managers, banks and insurers were telling us they don't understand or are unconvinced about the return on investment is for these market opportunities. They are looking to pilot a few instruments, but the time lag to scale up those pilot financial instruments are quite long. The conversion cost for farmers and actors in the supply chain to adopt practices are quite expensive, and so there definitely is a need for concessional finance or a longer tenure of these financial instruments to address that. There are quite a range of international sources of concessionary finance, and many of them target small-scale farmers. In some interviews with asset managers, they were telling us that South Africa has insufficient numbers of small-scale farmers to be able to provide that minimum investment size or pipeline deals. And that there's a lack of independent or technical advisory service for farmers and actors in the value chain, and no concessionary finance is currently offered. Then if we looked at the current climate financial instruments and mechanisms, maybe a good place to start is what the risks are that the financial service industry would need to address. So if you look at the risks, one could categorize that as macroeconomic risk or business risks. And so any of these instruments and mechanisms would need to address all of those risks. We then looked at a global best practice in terms of what finance products are out there. We looked at equity-based debt finance and impact investment funds, and quite surprised to see that there are many out there. I won't go into a lot of detail now just because of the time limitation, but just to say that many of them are being funded by development finance institutions, that they do tend to have a technical advisory service that is offered together with the debt finance instrument, and also that they have got quite a robust impact metric monitoring and evaluation. So what many of you will be interested in is the South African landscape and what facilities are currently available. So the first one is the Nedbank shade netting finance instrument. I'm not going to talk to that now because Zan will give a really good insight later on. We have the Santam short-term insurance contract, which largely focuses on export fruit, on risk mitigation. We have the Land Bank credit line, which was discontinued, but a very good example of using concessional finance to fund climate adaptation and resilience. Standard Bank sustainability linked debt facility that is offered to Woolworths that not only targets the food sector, but fashion, beauty and home. We have the Restore Africa Impact Fund, which Nick will talk to us later, focusing on regenerative agriculture, and the 27/4 Agricultural Transition Bond, which from our understanding will be listed soon. Then if we look at opportunities, I see I'm running out of time soon. When we looked at the opportunities in terms of job potential and the ease of access for farmers and agribusinesses, the five main themes, let's say, was regenerative agriculture, undercover farming, novel farming, smart farming, and renewable energy. If we look at the quantum or estimate of the market opportunity, we relied largely on the Green Crop Market Intelligence Report. We see that there's real significant investment in the low-tech system like tunnels and netting, in smart farming, which is the application of remote sensing and software, and then regenerative agriculture, and Nick will talk to that a little bit later. I'm just going to skip this slide because I see I'm running out of time soon. So then just to end off with the recommendations. So there are 7 key recommendations. The first one being is that we need greater disclosure of climate-related financial information so that investors are able to make informed choices. We are seeing greater disclosure aligned to the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. And so some banks, we've seen some disclosure on the agricultural sector, and that helps to identify opportunities and develop a pipeline. We're needing that technical assistance I mentioned earlier. There's lack of capacity and awareness on the ground. We're needing an incubator to address the lack of pipeline deals. We definitely need a dedicated financial climate facility so that we can make that investment case clear, address the perception of high risk and large transaction costs. Just the very nature of agriculture is that we need spatial data at a much finer scale than we have available at the moment, and we need grant funding to address that. We need the concessional finance to deal with the fact of the higher conversion costs. And then lastly, we need an incubator. There are many SMME incubators out there. We only came across 3 agricultural incubators, but there's a need for a dedicated agricultural climate finance incubator to address the concerns. So thank you. That was quite a sort of a pitch session, just in the interest of time. Nikki, I see about a few minutes for questions. I'm unable to see the chat function. So I'm just going to ask Nikki and Katania to help me to address any questions that there may be in the chat.
Thanks, Wendy. So we have the first comment is that getting there will take a lot more than the standard fare of vague declarations and far in the future policy horizons. Instead, world leaders have to deliver concrete and immediate policy proposals that outline a dynamic reduction in greenhouse gas emissions so that net zero can be achieved by 2050, which is maybe more of a statement than a question. And then from Sarah, we have the first question. Did Wendy say the primary agricultural sector is not well supported by financing options? Is there a reason why? I don't know if you want to answer that part first, Wendy.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'll respond. So what we found is that it's underfunded. So yes, it is well supported by largely commercial banks and to a lesser extent the other players in the financial sector. But there's definitely an opportunity for additional funding, particularly related to climate finance. So there's a gap there at the moment. We're not seeing any particular player that is offering dedicated facilities in that place. Yeah. Nikki, I'm just going to unshare so Brett can start sharing while I wait for the other questions. Any other questions,
Thanks,
Nikki?
Wendy. Yes, the second part to Sarah's question was surely hundreds of localized smaller gardens is a preferable resilience response, and also shorten supply chains as episodes such as rising COVID floods, etc., has shown is preferable, i.e. where possible local production for local needs.
Thanks, Sarah. I agree with you. A good starting point is household food security, and gardens at home can address that. Obviously, to deal with the larger supply issues, we would need the sector, the entire subsistence, small scale and commercial sector to come on board. Any
Thanks,
other
Wendy.
questions, Nikki?
No,
I see that Brett is ready.
Yes, Brett is ready. There's one more question from Alexandra in the chat,
Sure.
but perhaps you can answer that in the chat.
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah. So thanks so much, Brett. We're really excited to have Brett with us today. Brett is the co-founder and CEO of Mzanzi Meat, and he's going to share with us the story of being Africa's first to market with a cultivated burger, and he's going to share with us. Thanks so much, Brett. Over to you. Brett, we can't hear you.
Okay, now I'm assuming you can.
All good. Thanks, Brett.
Got a bit of a croaky voice. Yeah, so just apologies in advance for that. But it's thanks very much, Wendy, for having me. Thanks to WWF for this opportunity. It's very exciting for a company like us to be able to speak in an audience that we've just seen, and to hear about what other people are doing in the space when it comes to sustainable agriculture and finance. It's also really good to speak in front of a South African audience, because I predominantly speak in front of a foreign-based audience where I have to try and teach them how to say our name. So unless you guys, I'm sure everybody knows how to pronounce Mzanzi, but I'm sure you also know that it's a colloquial term for South Africa that literally means south, but I think we all know that it means a hell of a lot more. So it's great to be here. At the end of at the bottom there, you say I say we're making meat in Africa. We are Africa's first cultivated meat company. We're almost getting to market soon, probably by the end of the year. So we're really, really excited about that. A quick little tap on who I am and some of my team. I've been working in alternative protein for about 10, 15 years, predominantly in the plant-based side of things, and as well as animal advocacy. And after spending a time overseas and locally, I decided to join forces with a former management consultant from Bain by the name of Tasneem to start a company in cultivated meats. And because we saw that no one on the African continent had actually even started looking at it, and it was such a massive, growing and exciting industry in a number of other parts of the world. We also joined forces with our R&D director, Dr. Wade Edwards, who's got about 20-odd years in biotech experience, and he's been building everything from vaccines or the vats that you get beer in. So he's got a wonderful depth of experience that we take into Mzanzi. Our biggest milestone to date was that we were the first company in Africa to create Africa's first cultivated meat and beef burger. We did it about 6 weeks ago, so it's very, very new. We did it in front of a live audience. We got a chef, we got an accountant, and we got a politician. I know it sounds like a start to a joke, to eat the burger, because we wanted to make sure it wasn't me, someone who's not eaten meat in 15 years, saying, yes, this tastes delicious. I did eat it as well, so it was quite a test of my resilience of not eating meat for so long to go through that. But it really came across as something delicious, and I think that's what we're trying to do with Mzanzi is create a new food system by not taking away from anyone. I think a lot of people have the view when it comes to sustainable, it means to take away. Whereas what we're saying is we can do it abundantly when you take a few cells and turn them into trillions. Quite a few people listened to us when we launched the burger a couple of months ago. Maybe some of you heard about it as well. We got really, really exciting press from the folks at Forbes Africa, Business Insider, as well as Cape Talk. A number of people on the continent saw what we were doing, and we're pretty excited that CNN Africa, Carte Blanche, you, and Huisnoot are not on this list at the moment. So we're going to be talking to them very soon. What I've discovered after 15 years of talking about animal advocacy and animal agriculture, and particularly the role that intensive animal agriculture plays when it comes to environment, health, and animal welfare, is that people in South Africa generally don't believe it's a problem here. They say it's something that happens in America, it's not here. Well, there unfortunately isn't the case. There's somewhat in the region of 1 billion animals that are consumed yearly in South Africa, and large majority of those, being chicken, are raised in intensive animal agriculture conditions. We've also got some of the largest feedlots in the world. So we have copied the model, which unfortunately we've seen play out in a lot of other countries. And I think there's an opportunity for a company to disrupt that. But what is cultivated meat? Before I jump too far ahead, I thought I'd give you a very high-level process, but I'm going to get into a bit more detail in a bit. It isn't plant-based. That's a key component that I need everybody to understand. What we do is we take a tissue sample from a cow. We work at the sanctuary here in the Western Cape called Greyton. We take a small needle biopsy from that animal, and then we bring it to our facility here in Woodstock, just below Table Mountain, and we replicate the conditions that are found in that animal's body. And that roughly just means 37 degrees, amino acids, fatty acids, inorganic salts, a few other growth factors, and then those things create signals within the cells to replicate and proliferate and differentiate, which essentially just means we make muscle and fat. And after about 3 to 4 weeks, we then have enough muscle and fat at our current scale to make a couple of burgers. We are in the stage of kilograms, should I say, and we want to get to the tons. And I think that 3 to 4 weeks is super important, particularly for the people on this call. If you're thinking about the conventional animal agriculture system, to get a cow to slaughter weight requires 18 months. 18 months of feed or grass, regardless, water, land usage, etc. And we do that at a fraction of the time. And I think that's the real cost effectiveness of what our company is doing compared to the conventional, as well as the most environmental impactful thing that we will do. What is cultivated meat? As I said, it's not plant-based. Plant-based, your fries is a South African brand, Impossible or Beyond Meat. Some of you might be familiar with that. Those are texturized vegetable protein or pea protein or wheats, etc., that is made to look and taste like meat. Whereas fully cultivated is something that completely comes and derived from cells growing outside of an animal. The first burger that we produced was a combination, or what we call a blend. So we took about, well, the majority of it being cultivated muscle, and then we added a plant-based protein to sort of round it out. And that's done mainly because of a costing component, but also for familiarity for consumers in the beginning. Look at our team that is getting the job done. I have to always give them a shout out. They're doing incredible work. It's a bunch of scientists, food experts, and brand people that understand the South African market and are executing on the vision that we're doing. It's a small team. You can see we're about 9, 10, but we've got big ambitions to make something incredible happen. Here's a bit of a deep dive into what we're doing. On the left, top left, that's Galaxy. She's a cow from Greyton Farm Animal Sanctuary. We took a small biopsy, which is that it's about the size of a peppercorn, a little bit bigger, from her. She got some painkillers and a local anesthetic. She was up and running within 45 minutes. The procedure takes about 5. And we take that biopsy back to our lab. So the top right corner is where it all starts. It's called an incubator, which is obviously quite apt for what we're doing. And that's where our cells begin to grow. When that process gets to a certain level of cells growing in that 2D framework, as you can see, we then move it into something called a cultivator or a bioreactor. Now, this is essentially what you might be familiar with if you look at what is a beer vat, a vat where we brew beer, more of a fermenting process. We do a similar process, obviously with some slight differentials, excuse me. And that's where the cells really grow in that 3D muscle framework that happens in your body. And we're keeping it all regulated. pH levels, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, because we're just making a cow outside of the cow. We then combine it, as I mentioned, with plant-based proteins to get that final product that you see in the bottom right, which were the burgers that we launched a couple of months ago. Maybe now to more exciting things to the financiers in the audience. Some of you, I'm sure, IHE might have seen that some of you might come from the companies that are starting to look into the space of plant-based. It's very exciting. As I said, I've worked in the space for 15 years, and I remember speaking to retailers and banks, etc., 15 years ago, and the concept of a plant-based burger was as foreign as sushi was 50 years ago. But now it's mainstream. You're looking at the famous brands of the world, Tiger Brands, the biggest food companies on this continent are getting behind plant-based foods, which is incredibly exciting. I used to work for Fry's. That's where I cut my teeth, and Live Kindly, which is an international Swiss-based and American-based company, and did a joint venture with RCL to be able to expand upon the work of plant-based in South Africa. So we're doing something incredible right now, from the offerings that are being provided from Herbivore and Lexi's, but also from the companies that are looking into investing in the space. But now I go back to cultivated meat. We're an industry that is very young. Until 2013, the first burger ever made, some of you might know, was in 2013. That burger cost $250,000. Okay, there was one burger costing $250,000, and there was essentially one company for a number of years. Then 2015 rolled around, and a couple of companies started entering the space, particularly from the Netherlands, from Israel, but also from the likes of the US, Southeast Asia, etc. And the number of new companies skyrocketed, as well as a lot of the deals that started coming into it. You'll see that the deal count exploded, particularly in plant-based, but really in cultivated meat in the last 2 years. In 2020, a lot of companies, VC money, there was a lot of floating around, sloshing money around. A lot of it found its home in alternative protein, and then you saw just a giant leap in 2021. The thing, though, is that this majority is outside of Africa. As I said, we were the first. We started in March 2020, which, if some of you recall, a big world event happened, and 2 weeks before Cyril sat us down and told us we can't do much, we decided to start a company. It was a bit of a baptism of fire, but we managed to push through. But until that stage, not a single dollar of VC money, or actually any funding, had come into cultivated meats on the continent. We saw that as an opportunity, but it's also one of the biggest challenges we face as a young company. And the challenge is that we just see the opportunity. I mean, there are a number of predictions of what cultivated or cultured meat is going to be like in the next 20 years. But when there's 1 billion extra people coming onto the African continent by the year 2030 or 2040 or something like that, the opportunity is vast, particularly when it comes to like products of chicken, fish, and other sort of non-Western products, particularly lamb, mutton, etc. There's a vast amount of opportunity that we see, and it's going to keep growing. And cultivated meat is offering a number of opportunities, not just in the finance, but in some of those. Let's not do the same mistakes that the people in developed countries did when it comes to intensive animal agriculture. And facilities are starting to crop up everywhere. The reason why I show this to folks is to show clearly that Africa is being left behind. We're going to change that, but there's a massive opportunity to start building infrastructure into this exciting space on the continent. And we believe that the biotech hub is going to be Cape Town. The market is big. There might be some folks who've worked in the meat industry, but we do have to explain this to particularly foreign investors that South Africans, believe it or not, eat a lot of meat. Fortunately or unfortunately, it is a part of our culture, and at Mzanzi, we want to embrace that. We don't want to look at the fact that people love eating meat as an issue. We want to be able to provide meat that we believe is better. And also, the exciting component is that some of the research that we've done on the topic from consumers in South Africa is that there is interest and there's openness to something like cultivated meat when explained what it is, and a connection to the environment. We found that early adopters are looking something like Zulu-speaking, lower-income groups in in urban areas, and who would maybe even spend a little bit more for a cultivated beef burger if they understood exactly why, what was the benefit. But it's also quite important to sort of showcase us in terms of, and I think this is where South Africa wins and Africa wins compared to other parts of the world, the ability to take a coin and turn it over and over and over again. Cost-effectiveness is South African nature. We don't seem to throw money around as much as others, but we generally get the job done. And we were able to do, we've called it time to tasting, at a fraction of the time of some of our larger companies. Meatable is a European company. Upside is a massive. They're the first company to become a unicorn in the space in the States. So when in comparison to our cost and also our time to getting the job done, I think South Africa and Mzanzi meat is really stacking up quite nicely. And I've got 2 more minutes, and then I'm really looking forward to some questions. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of our timeline of what we're looking for. You've heard about our first milestone. The next process is optimizing our current, essentially craft brewery from 100 to 200 liters to get us to produce several kilograms per 3 to 4 weeks, to do some tasting events and lead up to our most exciting thing being a launch at RAFFs by the end of the year, or probably in Q1 of next year. Brian Altrich, who is the CEO RAFFs has been extremely bullish, excuse the pun, about cultivated meat, and he's been a big supporter over the last 12 months to get us to the stage where we want to be launching exclusively in RAFFs for the beginning of next year, and hopefully connecting into their wider network of Spur restaurants and other quick service restaurants to enable to take cultivated meat, a sustainable food, to the mainstream. And also we want to build a pilot production facility so that next time you guys see this, you'll be able to see a map of the world and there will be a facility highlighted in Africa. This is roughly what it looks like. It looks like a brewery if you've ever been to one. It's a bit more expensive, but that's just for now. Here's a sort of a bird's eye view of the facility that we're planning to build. This is artist rendition. That square with the 3-4 boxes is our bioreactor room or cultivator room. That's roughly a 10,000 liter production facility, which will be able to make 1.5 tons every month. This is just to give you some perspective of how we envision the future of food. And this, you would be able to, where you see the cow, you could sit down and actually see meat being made while you have a burger. And Galaxy, the cow, remains happy and healthy at a farm outside in Greyton. And again, just a close-up on the bioreactors from what they look like. Finally, this is more for a larger facility that we're looking at building. This is just a CAD for the next 24 months. This has got a capacity of roughly about 10,000 liters, where we, no, a little bit more. I can't remember the numbers not right now, but we're looking, that's a sort of a larger plan for what a facility like this will look like in the future. I'm going to skip through some of these things. Again, not too, it's a bit of a mystery box of what the future will look like, but we believe that at around a Series A that we might start seeing some revenues that start accounting for some of our costs and get people really excited on the continent. Just a quick look at some of our partners. I've mentioned some of them, but the one that I really would like to flag, or the two that I really like to flag, is Maan, which is a French flavor house company here in, well, they're from France, but they've got facilities with Deli Spices here in Epping and Cape Town. They helped us develop the delicious final product that we eventually got to market. And also in the bottom left, there might be some familiar names there. For us, it's key to work with players that are locally based because of cost, but also, you know, they just get the job done. So Cape Biofarms and Biotech are helping with some of the components in our media production, which is incredibly important, and S&C is from Stellenbosch. We're looking for future retail distribution partners, and obviously the main thing where we're at the moment, because we've just kicked off our seed round, is financing. So what we've really done with $700,000 is, well, about 10 to 12 million rand, has created this prototype and this showcase, this launch pad that we get to. We now need to take $5 million, create a facility, and bring it to the rest of South Africa. Okay, that is me. I took a little bit longer than I expected, but Wendy, thank you so much.
All good. Thanks so much, Brent. Well done to you and your team for your journey thus far. Really excited to see you saying that launch with RAFFs, scaling up and building. Yeah, so we've got quite a few questions. Brett, what I'm going to ask, is, I think I've counted 7, Nikki. Maybe you can just talk to 2 of them. I'll share that with you, and then you can just address the rest in the chat. So the first one is from Vicky Beckers from Nedbank. He asks, is your product antibiotic and growth hormone free? The next question from Sarah is, what about the health issues of eating too much meat? Surely the focus should be eating less meat, as well as humanely produced and cultivated meat, responsible production for the good of people's health and profit. So maybe you just respond to those 2. Thanks, Brent.
Cool. Happy, and they are sort of, those two are somewhat connected in terms of the health component. All our entire growth of our meat is in a completely sterile environment. So we at the highest health or standards that you would get for food. So there's no need for hormones, antibiotic usage, etc. Particularly as you grow into scale and you solve some of the issues from that initial. The only times we might have bacteria and all that kind of happening is at the sort of inception where you take the cells from an animal. So by moving forward, the usage of antibiotics and hormones is less than, I mean, it's a very small fraction, and it might be 0 going forward. So in comparison to what we see, I like to always compare to the conventional, because the conventional is hyper usage of both of those, and we've obviously seen what happens with zoonotic diseases over the last couple of years. So I think cultivated meat is not a silver bullet solution, but it's definitely an answer to help us move off the requirements of some of those things in hormones and antibiotics. But it's a very good question. I think the discussion of less meat is twofold. There's a cultural component, and then there's a health/environmental component. I've been talking to, I've been a somewhat professional animal advocate for 15 years. So I've spoken to tens of thousands more of South Africans, and I've tried to get them to eat less meat. It doesn't work. So as a pragmatic person, I had to change my approach. You can't tell someone to stop to eat less meat on a shishinyama or braai. It's not probably going to happen, and it might happen in the future, but not in my lifetime. So providing something that provides the same and if not better experience is key, and I think that's what we want to do. I think educating people along the way, because I think you're right, but we might be able to produce, let's say, a cholesterol-free burger, which is quite likely. We might be able to produce no trans fats, so there's a number of things that we might be able to do to counter that. And then when it comes to like the environmental arguments, cultivated meat, again, is not a silver bullet, but it potentially could provide an option that results in or requires a fraction of the land, a fraction of the water usage. It might require similar energy consumption as we have to conventional, but for the most part, you're sort of scoring a lot better than the conventional. Again, I think in a future, we might look at people looking to cut back, and like myself, I'd love to just be eating whole foods, plant-based, but I can't get over those Beyond Meat burgers. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, it sounds like developing this product, as you say, other than the environmental concerns, there are a lot of other things that your team needs to address as well. So, Brett, I'm going to ask Nick to share screen now. There are questions on the chat from David, Hayden, Aaron, and Francois. So if you can just respond to that. Thanks so much. Nick, we'll wait for you to share. Thanks, Nick. Nick van Schalkwyk is director at Heal the Land, Heal the People. Welcome, Nick. Nick has qualified as a chartered accountant. He's got 2 decades of experience in financial services, asset management, and corporate finance in particular. He co-founded Restore Africa in 2019, and Nick and his team is really passionate about making sure that the investment has real impact on the ground with integrity. Nick, we're really looking forward to you sharing with us your journey today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Just want to check, is my sound okay?
All good, Nick.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Why did you have to start with my sins of being a chartered accountant? But let's not harp on that. So firstly, just want to quickly say, Wendy, we're not in development anymore. We're actually fully operational. So that slide earlier just has to be updated. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We're very excited to speak to you today with regards to Restore Africa funds, and specifically our focus or our motto being Heal the Land, Heal the People. Just switching on my timer. So before I jump into the detail, let's speak about agriculture, and the introduction and the detail that Wendy gave really showed already how important agriculture is. I just want to really drive that home. So firstly, looking purely from a land use perspective, agriculture touches 80% of almost 80% of South Africa's land, with forests doing about 8% and the balance of urban areas, water bodies, etc., being about 13%. So agriculture really has a vast impact in everyday life. That comes with a huge responsibility of custodianship, and it comes with a huge opportunity set as well. The challenge, however, is that up to 75% of that agricultural land is still conventionally farmed. And that means it speaks to the so-called industrialization and specialization of agriculture. It speaks to monoculture in your crop production systems. It speaks to feedlots in your animal, your animal systems. It speaks to deep tillage, once again back to your crop production systems, and then finally a huge amount of chemical dependency. So if you look at the products that comes from the agricultural sector, and maize is an example that we consume as a country per annum around just close to 13 million tons of maize. That is up from 2011-12 year, which was around 10 million tons. But that effectively means that each of us consumes 600 grams of maize per day, and that's a fair amount of maize. Obviously, it's in the form of starches and cereals. It also is where it's fed to animals with regards to the protein we then consume. And also the last while, you've seen a big increase in alternative uses, more industrial uses of maize. The question is, who produces that maize? And it's obviously the farmers in the agricultural sector. And if we look at the macroeconomic backdrop, what these farmers have experienced. So they've seen over the last 16, 17 years that the price of maize has generally gone up by around 5.5%. We've had the last 2 years of incredible price action in all commodities, including soft commodities. But generally, you've seen, let's call it 5.5% increase in your selling price. If you then turn to what it costs and what it takes to produce the maize that we consume as an example. So fertilizer, as we all know, is a key input into the production of crops and maize as well. So over time, we've seen an increase in the amount of fertilizer that is required to produce the crops that we harvest. So from around 55 kilograms per hectare, early 2000s, excuse me, to around 73 kilograms per hectare. So there's been a steady increase in the amount of fertilizer that is required to produce our food. And what we've seen, if we for starters, let me just quickly put on my pointer. Apologies. I just want to check. I heard a sound now like the call went down. Am I still online, Nikki, Wendy?
All good. All good.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So if we ignore the last 2 years we've had for now, we've had COVID, we've had the various supply chain issues, which are very well known. And more recently, we've had the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We've seen, if you just go to before that period, to around 2018, over the last 14, 15 years, generally, the key inputs into fertilizers have gone up by 8.5%, 9%. Even ammonia, which has gone up the least, has increased in price more than what the selling price of maize, for instance, has done. So what does that mean? It means that conventional agri is being squeezed from both the selling price side and also the input price side. So they're really in a vice and they're being squeezed, which means profit margins are under pressure, and we see farms and farmers failing regularly, which is a significant threat to food security and various other socioeconomic impacts. So what's the solution? The solution is sustainable, climate-smart agriculture. And crazy as it is, the solution lies under our feet, literally. It's the soil. So if we are able to, on a large scale, implement what is called conservation and regenerative agriculture, or CARA for short, we would be able to have a significant impact. And that speaks really to going back to the basics of nature, how natural ecosystems operate. So if you look at the core principles of CARA, there are 5. There are various practical applications within each of these core principles. But what is it really about? It's about these 5 core principles. Firstly, minimum soil disturbance. Stop tilling. Secondly, increase biodiversity. Many of our farms, I mentioned earlier, has become monoculture operations with animals totally separated from your agricultural system. By bringing back diversity into your system, you're bringing back the way that nature operates, but you're also stacking income streams, which speaks directly to the financial sustainability of agricultural operations. You require a living root system all year round. The ecosystem below soil is a living ecosystem. Well, it should be. In many instances, it's not, but it should be. And that ecosystem requires sugars, and the sugars are produced by the plants by way of photosynthesis. And about 40% of what a plant produces is pushed down to its roots, and that is then exchanged at the root level with various organisms in that soil ecosystem. And if you just have roots for 4 months of the year and you harvest and then there's no living root system, that ecosystem literally just dies of hunger. Fourthly, we require increased soil protection. We're not called sunny South Africa for nothing. We have an abundance of sun, and for that you need protection. It's quite similar to our skins with sunscreen. It has many impacts, but the 2 key ones is firstly you keep the soil temperature at more acceptable levels for biological function to happen. You know, these organisms like us cannot function when it's 50 degrees, and we struggle to function if we're exposed to extreme cold also for extended periods. And the other very important impact in specifically in the South African environment, where we have a drier type climate and water is not abundant, is that it assists with water infiltration when it rains, and it assists then to keep that moisture in the soil much longer, and that is then available to the plants in the ecosystem to utilize, because water, as we know, is life. And then finally, the integration of animals back into your system. You can't just have a dog on the farm. You must have, as much as possible, animal diversity as well. So not just cattle, sheep, goats, chicken, the more the merrier, because they all bring specific impacts to the ecosystem. They are effectively the walking, breathing generators of compost, and they also assist in the whole process and the vibrancy of the ecosystem in the soil. So what are we doing? We did converting dust, because most of our commercially cultivated agricultural land literally is dust, and everything is inserted externally as external inputs back into soil, which is a living ecosystem, which is capable of supporting a whole host and providing free of charge a whole host of ecosystem goods and services. Practical example, this is a farm outside Ottosdal in the Northwest Province. The picture I'm going to show next is the same farm, so it speaks to the same soil type, the same climate, i.e. same temperatures, same same rainfall, apologies. And this is how a conventional system generally looks. You have, due to tilling, this plow soil here, so the plant's root system can't, this is rock hard, so it can't actually grow further down. And generally you see that the soil is devoid of any life. It just looks like dust. So this is not a very vibrant ecosystem, and it also is a system where all of your inputs have to be externally inserted. Turning to CARA, so you see this system, there is no plow soil here. The roots of these maize plants are able to develop much deeper and able to access nutrients and water much deeper. You see the soil cover that I mentioned earlier to protect with regards to that sunburn. So this system here is vibrant. It provides you with a whole host of ecosystem goods and services. And you can see the color has also changed, predominantly due to carbon being pulled back into the soil. Right, so Restore Africa funds. What do? Our mission is heal the land, heal the people. Sure, and I'm very conscious of time. I have to speed up a bit. So this is a very loaded statement. So what it says, firstly, heal the soil, heal physically the land. And as you do that and you produce nutrient-dense food sustainably, you start healing individual people with good quality nutrient-dense food. But then that's at the micro level. If you then go to the macro level, if you're able to heal one farm after the other in urban, in rural areas, starting to heal farmland, you're starting to heal communities, you're getting jobs created. Agriculture has one of the highest multipliers with regards to the ability to create job opportunities. You start healing the land as a whole, and then you start healing our population, which has had sufficient scarring over the years and degradation in general. So it's a vast opportunity, but also a vast responsibility. So what is the challenge? And Wendy, your finding speaks exactly to what we found. There's a systemic failure to access funding specifically for the conversion to CARA. Solution is Restore Africa funds. We provide an institutional solution which addresses both the financial challenges and the technical challenges. We do not purchase land. We don't own the land. We collaborate with the land user. We are land tenure agnostic. It's not about the land per se. It's about what you do with the land and how you manage that responsibly, sustainably. So we then convert that land management practice from conventional agri, deep tillage, lots of chemicals, to CARA. On this point, just note that CARA doesn't mean no chemicals. One has to be pragmatic. A very purist niche of CARA would be organic food where there's no chemicals being added. Over time, we want to all, I suppose, reach that level. But as you start the process, you can't go just and start over to organic. It's a process. It's a whole spectrum of change. And then what CARA does, it addresses critical environment and social issues through impact-based outcomes. It drives profitability and hence sustainability, but it's in unison with nature, not fighting against nature. And it drives climate change and adaptation and mitigation. And because of that, there's also the cherry on top potential for farmers who then do this changeover to generate carbon credits, as it's called in colloquial terms, or more formally carbon offsets. And that's just a cherry on top. And because of that, Restore Africa Fund incorporated and capitalized a company called Cultivating Carbon, which assists farmers with this process. So what is it really about? It's about this. The return per hectare for farming enterprises in the conventional sphere has over time declined due to cost pressures, due to climate variations, due to general soil fertility declines. The answer, as I said, is CARA, and that brings down your costs, and it increases system resilience, and it improves your soil health. But like any investment, there's a period where you have to put money in to reap the benefits. And that dip that we see here comes from three potential areas. Firstly, as you start weaning the system of all the chemicals, there is a potential dip in your yield that is countered by the reduction in that input cost. But we assume in our processes that there is a bit of a decline in your operational cash flows. Thirdly, your equipment has to change. No more plowing or tilling. So you have to get a no-till plant. You don't need very high-power tractors. You can purchase smaller tractors, for instance. And also livestock stacking and restocking, bringing animals back into the system. If that is bridged, we're then able to share the upside with the land user. So does it really work? Absolutely, it does. In a recent study done by our group of experts and was published in the SA Grain magazine, it shows on-field trials for the last couple of years in the Mpumalanga Highveld, and it just shows you what the systems does. Conventional tilling fails long before you get to 30 years. This farm would have failed. No-till, which is the initial start to conservation agriculture, is a lot better, but you require the full integration of those 5 principles to have this benefit. So you see the dip there initially, but then you share the benefit long term. So how does it work? It is a systemic solution. So we require more than one individual to make it work. So you have the land user, and then Restore Africa Fund is the funding vehicle that is operationalized by, apologies, for every land parcel that we work with, there's an OPCO. We start afresh with a newly established and capitalized OPCO, and the farming venture is then run within that business. Restore Africa Fund is operationalized by Integrity Asset Management from a long-term investment management perspective, and also the financial governance framework. And then our sister company, Wildco, does the day-to-day financial management and cash flow management. But in the end, it's about sustainable agri. And our colleagues at Integra Trust Group, which has a couple of operating entities, then does the on-farm extension services, the support, the mentoring, etc. And Integra is in turn supported by Asset Research, which is an NPO that does ecosystem restoration related R&D, and their outcomes feed into Integra. So you sit with two unwavering pillars. The one is a pillar of financial governance best practices. On the other side, that ethos of natural restoration practically implemented by way of CARA. The fund, I'm going to go very quickly over this. The fund is a private equity fund. It has a multi-tier share class structure, which provides investors with the ability to target certain outcomes by way of CARA, or just going straight into the general fund and then have a whole range of underlying projects in which they invested, specifically then for financial gain. But in return, or in addition to financial returns, you also get ESG returns and even potentially carbon credits, as I mentioned, as dividends in specie. So it's blended finance and action, with equity being raised as the primary catalyst to change, but grant or debt funding is accepted and can be utilized and will be utilized. Similarly, we in the end produce soft commodities and animal proteins. So there are commodity buyers that would like to procure that. So production finance and come from there from offtake agreements. So we have a pipeline of projects. We've raised capital under Section 12J of the Income Tax Act. Act. We've operationalized 3 opcos already, up and running, various types of applications. In addition to that, we've got 25 institutionally ready projects located well and spread across South Africa. And in addition to that, there are many more projects which we are busy with in the grooming phase. Our journey to access hasn't been easy, but we're being patient and persistent. Started the business in 2019. COVID stole too much time from from all of us. October 2020, we got going again. Lots of interactions with local funders, banks, private investors. I mentioned the 15.5 million we raised under Section 12 today. And we're now in advanced discussions with a large European DFI with D-Day next Wednesday, which we really are excited about. We're open for business. Please come and speak to us. Thank you, Wendy.
Thanks so much, Nick. Like you said, it's been a long journey, and only patience and perseverance got you this far, and your passion for the industry. Nick, there are quite a few questions. I'm just going to share 2 with you. The first one is from David. He's putting a challenge to you. He's saying, when you look at conservation agriculture, potentially at the tillage and other parts of the production process, should you not look to reduce fossil fuels in the whole process as well?
Absolutely.
So that's the first one. The second one is from Marika, and her question is around the incentives for regenerative agriculture. Should the farmer be incentivized? She gave an example of a lower insurance cost because the farmer is then in a better position to manage their risks. And then also in terms of the interest rate or the pricing from the banks, because they're able to show improved cost for output. So just those 2 questions. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. So on the first point, absolutely. And that is exactly what CARA does, because you don't till anymore. There's a significant reduction in the power that's required to cultivate the land, physical tractor power. So you see up to a 50% decrease in fuel, fuel being burnt effectively, also other chemical inputs, fertilizers, lime, etc. So absolutely, it brings down, and that's one of the key factors that makes this intervention over time so profitable from an agri perspective. So yeah, absolutely. The second question, again, absolutely true. The challenge is, and we often say this, money makes the world go round, but it's also the root of many evils. So we have to work with it very, 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 what's the word now, prudently. And I'm saying that, so we can't speak for banks, we can't speak for concessional financiers. It's absolutely required. That's why the DFI space is so important here. That's why we're speaking to the DFIs. It will absolutely help, definitely it would. But for now, we're looking at bridging that first gap. We first have to get farmers to start that conversion and start the process. Bringing down your insurance cost, absolutely, that'll have a significant impact. When we then crowd in debt, excuse me, we need then crowd in debt from private sector debt providers. With this process being, from a risk mitigation perspective, a lot better managed, it means that debt costs should come down. But that is driven, unfortunately, by market forces. We can't dictate that. But I like your message, by the way. Thank you, Wendy. I'm going to stop there.
Thanks so much, Nick. So please just respond to the other questions on the chat function. I see Zan's already sharing his screen. He's ready to go. So Zan Meyer is Head of Agricultural Commodities at Nedbank CIB Global Commodity Finance. He's going to talk us through shade net financing. I met Zan when I started at WWF in 2013 on the WWF Nedbank partnership. So Zan, I know, has really been driving, looking at innovative solutions to address sustainability in their team. Thanks so much, Zan. Over to you.
Wendy, thanks so much. And important to note that partnership celebrated our 30th year last year. So in terms of that very, very successful partnership with WWF, and proud to be here. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I think just to start, and let me just go to the next slide. It seems to be problematic at the moment. There we go.
There you go.
Just to talk about why we're here, and I think this is quite a profound statement for a financial institution to make, is this is not our vision, this is not our mission, this is actually our purpose. So Nedbank a couple of years ago adopted this as our purpose. In other words, the reason why we exist. And this is something that we're trying to drive home to all 27,000 Nedbankers on a daily basis, is to use our financial expertise to do good for individuals, families, businesses, and society. And this sounds like a pitch, but really not if you think about it in terms of where we are with future sustainability. So Nedbank adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular for agriculture. And sometimes it seems almost easy because we look at number 6, the goal number 6, clean water sanitation. 12 is responsible consumption and production, which is critically important for agriculture, especially in South Africa. And Nick alluded to it in terms of soil resources and water usage. So for us, that is critical to think about that in agricultural finance. And then the other one is SGD goal number 15, which is life on land. So what Nedbank did a couple of years ago is we actually categorized the SGDs, or Sustainable Development Goals, in 3 distinct categories. The one on your left on the screen is Sustainable Development Finance. In other words, this is what we do. This is our purpose. So how do we apply funding and loans and our expertise towards our clients in the bigger banking environment out there? And again, specifically, you'll see SGD 6, 12, and obviously, you know, the other one being life on land, 15 there. The other ones I think that's important is also from a sustainable development finance goal is number 7, it's clean energy. And as you would know and notice on the billboards outside the highways, Nedbank particularly keen on renewable energies. We are a major market player there. The other one is Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth, which is crucial for any financial institution and for every business in South Africa, frankly. And then Sustainable Cities and Communities, which is SDG number 12. The operations one in the middle of your screen there is what we do as Nedbank internally. So that goes towards things like we can fix and be attentive to inside the business. And that would be goals like number 5, which is gender equality, and also goal number 17, which is creating partnerships, and like exactly what we're doing here, Wendy, with the Nedbank WWF partnership. And then the last one is CSI, and it's important to make a clear distinction between, on the left-hand side, Sustainable Development Finance, because that is what we do as a bank, and then CSI on the right-hand side, which is literally something that we do as our corporate social responsibility and incentives, things like zero hunger, number 2, number 1, no poverty. For us, that's crucial, but that is not our purpose at this point in time. It's a blend of all 3 of these. So just to talk about the citrus landscape, and this is courtesy of Justin Chadwick when he was still at Citrus Growers Association. And just more in general, the agriculture has shown remarkable resilience in 2020 and 21. We've had double-digit growth in both those years, also looking at very high growth in 2022. And yes, it has been related to the fact that we have had a very pronounced La Nina year, in other words, very wet year, record maize crops, and also record citrus crops. So talking about soft citrus prices up 15%. We are the 2nd largest exporter of citrus globally, being in very healthy environment and company of countries like Brazil, Egypt, Mexico, and Spain. And I think this is important, is the growth in the sector with farmers continuing to plant. We've had 2,800 hectares of citrus planted in 2021, 2020 alone. Now this for me is a profound show of trust in the industry, and farmers still engaging in massive capital expenditure on farms to grow their businesses. And this is in the light of the fact that we are constrained in terms of resources, so we need to get that balance right. And again, that's where the Nedbank purpose comes in, right? 22% increase in exports from South Africa last season, and especially soft citrus, the focus now, high value crops, 29% increase. 150 million cartons exported. That's about 2 million tons of citrus. If you really think about it, it's a massive amount of logistics and supply chain management, and obviously getting the fruit off the land in time. 20 billion worth of exports, which is a major contributor to the GDP. So for us as Nedbank, citrus very much a focus industry in terms of generating wealth, and obviously then giving the opportunity to think about this cleverly. So what did we do when we embarked on this journey? Is we said that citrus farmers, important component of our members, our cooperatives, our wholesale agri-financiers. How do we look after our clients? And I think maybe important just to position this. We are Nedbank CIB, Corporate and Investment Bank. and not to be confused with our esteemed colleagues sitting in the commercial bank, which also has a very active, and Wendy, you are well aware of this, agricultural portfolio looking at bilaterally funding primary producers or farmers on the land. We look at more of the wholesale solutioning for the cooperatives and wholesale financiers into the industry. So we talked about industry growth amidst rising input cost. Nick, thank you very much for your slide showing that agriculture, that fertilizer basically doubled, some insecticides and herbicides up to 140%, just purely because of the reasons that you mentioned. And then I think very important is water allocations to commercial farmers has basically stagnated. So it's very difficult to get additional water allocations in terms of irrigation. Now, what does that do? Is if I use 20% less water on my existing land, it means I can grow my orchards with 20% with the same amount of water. It's a simple calculation, but when you drive that home to your clients, it becomes a very real risk mitigant in terms of growing the industry and being more profitable. So farmers generally constrained in raising collateral. If you think about this in terms of conventional agricultural finance, you give me a mortgage over your land and I'll give you funding against that. This is not how we think about this, and I'll get to that on the next slide. But I think generally the statement is sustainable and profitable farmers de-risk our overall portfolio and also the overall portfolio for our wholesale financiers. We talked about SDG 12, that's on the left-hand side bottom corner there, responsible consumption and production. Obviously, water and soil goes without saying. And our tests and our research and the reporting that we're getting back from our clients on the shade netting initiative is that we save up to 30% water. We've got increased yields, which is crucial for us in terms of the responsible production. So 35% increase in tons per hectare and kilograms per tree. And then our pack out percentage, and this is crucial because it adds towards the profitability of the farmer plowing that back into the soil, is 30%. Now, what does that mean? Pack out means the increase in exportable or high value fruit. In other words, you don't send your fruit to juicing or the local market. You actually are able to export 30% more than what you were without netting. So climate change and natural hazards, I think this has been proven over and over. Protects against wind, hail, frost, sunburn, and birds. So all those natural perils that impacts on yield and quality of fruit. Fruit more uniform in size and color. We talk about pack out percentage. That is exactly what the global market wants, and that is what we need to do to sustain our position as the second largest citrus exporter in the world. Prevents cross-pollination. We talked about obviously the prevention of let's call it the weird and wonderful kind of genetics being introduced into this process. That is not what we want. And I think crucial here in terms of patient capital. Citrus can take 4 to 5 years to get your first yield. What we've shown here with shade netting is these trees come into full production almost a year earlier. And that in terms of your interest component of your financing is critical. We buffer temperature extremes, and unfortunately climate change is real. We've just had yesterday a heat wave in the Cape, so I think that's something that is very close to home, and it buffers. So what we've seen is shade netting buffers those extremes. Fruit likes standard and let's call moderate climatic conditions, and it increases relative humidity. We talked about water saving on the left-hand side there. So disadvantages, it's expensive. At this point in time, and because of demand, and Nick also mentioned about the logistical challenges of getting the netting into the system, obviously the poles, the anchors, the cables, and all those kind of things, 280,000 Rand a hectare, and this is what it costs you for flat land. Obviously on uneven land, terraced orchards, your poles need to be higher. There's additional cost of that, and obviously your anchors and cables and all those kind of things contributes to that. So also prone to wind and hail damage. There is insurance against those kind of things, but it is an additional cost. You might have additional labor costs because your trees are going to demand more frequent pruning, and obviously more intensive pruning because you're sitting with a tree that is in a condition that allows it to grow. And then microclimate under netting, all kinds of weird and wonderful insects now are possible to get into a thriving biosphere because there's none of these outside buffers and outside perils that get these animals to actually not proliferate. And that is something that is a risk, and the farmer needs to understand that he needs to manage that. So how do we differentiate the shade netting product? This is not conventional. We like to think that we think about it a bit differently, and think about our purpose, money experts who do good. is we don't ask for an additional mortgage. We don't ask the farmer to give us additional collateral. I think it's important, and maybe just to go to the previous slide, inside that green circle there, it's additional to our conventional production loan. So we like to have a farmer as a Nedbank client or a wholesale financier as a Nedbank client already. We need to understand that business, understand what the business aligns towards. And in that context, we then give this sustainable finance. We take a session over the multi-peril insurance, the wind, hail, and fire against the netting. So that is in essence our protection against the loan. But what we do is we do understand that if the farmer does what he does best, shade netting will enable him to be a more profitable farmer. What that does for us is it increases the cash flow for the farmers. It equals a healthy loan book, and obviously it equals a reduction and mitigation of our lending risk. So this is the way we try to think it a bit more cleverly and say a better farmer, more profitable farmer leads to be those farmer needs, that farmer book then obviously declines in risk for the bank. It has an impact on interest rates, and I'll talk to that in the next, this green second block from the left. We are able to give finance at very competitive rates, taking into account that tenor or term funding is a bit more expensive than production finance. We don't generally charge high fees for implementation of the facilities. Our rewards as Nedbank, again, comes back in terms of that sustainable development goals. We then measure the goals and the returns in terms of water saving and pack out percentages. And I think that's the next slide, the yellow block there. But just to come back to no penalties for early settlement. Originally, we calculated, and the demand from the industry was for 5-year loan tenors. What we found is, in most cases, these loans are being repaid in 2 to 3 years. And it's just testimony to the fact that the pronounced impact or the profound impact that shade netting has on the farmer and his business allows him to repay these loans much quicker. So obviously we would not penalize the farmer for paying earlier. And the general, I would say, trend and the general nature of the facilities that we give to these wholesale financiers, the cooperatives and the like, is a RCF. It's a revolving credit facility. So what we do is, as the farmers pay back the loans, we actually allow to top up to the headroom of the total facility. So the cooperative would be able then to actually provide new loans to new farmers for the same purpose as the old farmers repay their loans. And what we found is, and was no surprise to us, that these loans are generally maximized in terms of their drawdowns and utilization. So there's always a performance from the farmer side. He gets funding at a very good rate. What is his obligation towards the bank? We want to know what's going out there. We actually put this into our facility agreements to the farmers and to the cooperatives. It is a legal requirement for the farmer then to give us accurate and regular reporting. We understand that obviously it's only seasonal, but we actually, and what we found is they do this anyway. I think critical management of resources in terms of water and pack out percentages are an integral part of a commercial farmer's business. It's easy for them to report back to us, and this is why I feel confident to say that the numbers that we put out there are numbers that's real and tangible. And this is basically an average from all the farmers that we're getting. In terms of contractors for the netting, we look at SABS approved contractors. Obviously, the insurance companies must approve that netting installer. We do not deal with fly-by-nights. And I think it's important for us, also farmers or installers with some sort of credibility and working capital, to just at least start the projects and get the stock ready. We're not in the business of project finance this netting. But I think also important for us is if that contractor can give us a guarantee on work, that makes a lot of sense for us. So just in terms of a practical example, the Coöperasie, one of our Nedbank clients down in Humansdorp, they service about 1,700 farmers, which are actually members of the cooperative. And just for those of you who don't know, Humansdorp is actually one of the true and last true cooperatives in the country, being an actual Coöperasie. The other ones have converted to corporates. But so these 1,700 farmers are members. They actually shareholders in the cooperative. And obviously they get then rewarded at the end of every year for the amount of business they do with the cooperative. These 1,700 members produce 30% of South Africa's citrus and dairy on an annual basis. And we've engaged with the cooperative or the Coöperasie in 2018, which is about 4 years ago. We started with a borrowing base for the seasonal working capital of these farmers. And then we started discussing, with the Humansdorp cooperative and senior management, how do we make this relationship a long-standing one in terms of membering or benefiting the members, making sure that the members are more sustainable and thereby obviously reducing my risk and making the coöperatie a sustainable entry point into agriculture in the Eastern Cape. And at that point in time, it became very, very prominent that the Kuga and Impofu dams are suffering. There was a sustainable drought there, and you guys must have seen that day zero in Kuberga for water is getting very, very close. So Kuga dam levels, major issue. Having said that, some of these farmers obviously get water out of the Sundays River Citrus irrigation scheme, water out of the Gariep Dam. But I think important for us is then we formulated this specialized, let's call it ring fence facility, term loan facility for shade netting. Currently, where the coöperatie is at 3,867 hectares under shade netting, it's formidable, but to put it into context, you saw the 99,000 hectares under citrus already planted. It's less than 4%. So I think the potential for growth in the industry in terms of this facility for us and for other commercial banks is immense. Saving 1.2 million cubic meters of water annually. Now, just to put that into context, I made the sum quickly. It's about 220,000 commercial swimming pools of water that we save on an annual basis. Now that is just, yeah, I just needed to put it into context, saying, you know, more than 200,000 swimming pools, significant amount of water that we are saving for these farmers through the shade netting product. Backout percentage on certain of these farms, and not all of them, I must say, that obviously there are various factors that influences this, but from 65% to 86% on certain farms, significant yield improvement. And just to put that into context, if you get a 40% yield increase, and you get, from 65 to 86% increase, your revenue, and this is not net profit, your revenue per hectare can go up to about 562,000 Rand per hectare. This is what we've seen on some of our farms. So phenomenal saving and phenomenal increase in productivity. Nick also spoke about workers and agriculture being a major source of employment in South Africa, in the Gamtoos Valley, just because of the netting and the severe stress that the system was under in terms of drought and the increase that shade netting actually did in terms of productivity. We're sitting now with 8,000 seasonal workers who are now job secure, who about 5 years ago had major issues in terms of actually there was nothing for them to pick. So from that perspective, I think that's all from my side, Wendy. And certainly the last slide is hopefully not us and not the reason why these people are on the call. We obviously look for the solutions, and I trust that this is just one of them. And bearing in mind, and I haven't seen the questions yet, yes, it's a small start for Nedbank in the agricultural industry. We have various other initiatives, but I think it's important just to share this because it does make sense from a commercial perspective for the farmer, absolutely, but also from a bank in terms of mitigating risk. So it's almost a win-win in the financial sector, which I think is quite unique. So open for questions. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate that. Your last photograph also reminds me of Nick's slide where he said the solutions are under our feet. And I'm sure many farmers, will be able to share many stories with us. So don't underestimate the knowledge of the farmers. So we are slightly over time for my wrap up. So I'm just going to put one question to you, Shahida, and there's another one from David, but you can respond on the chat. So Shahida's just trying to understand the citrus industry a bit better. So first question was around where are you currently offering this product? And you spoke to the Humansdorp Co-op. So I don't know if there are plans to expand that. And then does the citrus require a lot of water? Will it thrive in dry areas? You did talk a little bit to the water saving, so maybe just respond to that. Thanks, On.
Yeah, so I think important is irrigation is crucial for the citrus industry. There are very few dry land orchards that run. So irrigation, obviously the demand for water as and when the plant needs it. So to answer the last question first, irrigation areas, and I don't know if you would have seen the first slide, that's actually in the Northern Cape. So we are looking towards rolling this out, and we have actually offered these facilities to some of our clients up in the Camewood area, which is Northern Cape next to the Orange River. Letsateli Valley, important sector for us in terms of citrus, massive growth there, large commercial farmers with huge need for citrus netting. And please do yourself a favor when you drive around in the northern areas. in terms of our country, is shade netting has become almost the norm. And I do not think that it is sustainable practices for a commercial citrus farmer not to think at least about covering a portion of his orchard under shade netting. But I think important for us is to actually roll this out. We've started with the co-op, it was a test project, but the co-op is actually also rolling this out into other provinces. And just to talk about maybe just supply chain integration, and this is an opportunity for many of these entities and clients of ours, is that they have now integrated into businesses that actually service the shade netting industry. So they would invest in companies like Knitix, who would weave and knit these nets. They would invest in companies that prepares the poles and the anchors and the cables. So it's important to see that it's of utmost interest for our clients to also invest in the infrastructure. But yes, just to come back to that, citrus unfortunately extremely water intensive. Yeah.
Sure, thanks, Son. So if you just can respond in the chat to a question from David and one from Gray.
I will do so, thank you.
Thank you. So I have shared my screen. Nikki, can I just get a heads up that you can see that? All good.
Yes, you can see.
Perfect. Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, so we were scheduled to end at past, so we got 3 minutes to go. So I would completely understand those of you that need to sign out at 11:30, but for those of you that do have some time, please stay on just for the way forward and wrap up. So I mentioned that we're part of the Climate and Sustainable Investment Project funded by the Lewis Foundation. Today was just the first of our sector-focused webinars. So please look out on our website below for our transport and electricity webinars that are coming up. We will also invite you to be part of our one-on-one engagement with asset managers, insurance and banks. So the next step is to take those recommendations in consultation with those of you on the call, to look at how we can get closer to finding those solutions similar to the ones that were presented today. So we have some initial, partners that we've selected from our stakeholder engagement for this report. But if any of you today on the call, from what you've heard, are quite keen to engage with us, please reach out to me. It could be in terms of sharing your case studies. Perhaps you very early on in terms of developing your own financial product and need our support and assistance in terms of market intelligence, understanding where the concessional finance is, understanding if there's pipeline deals. So please reach out to me. Then in terms of staying connected, we have got a newsletter. Please sign up on the website below, visit our resource portal, have a look at our social media. And we'd definitely like to stay connected with all of you. We've been really impressed with the number of attendees across the financial ecosystem and those involved in the agricultural and food sector. So thank you for your time today. We've really been inspired by the presentations from Brett, who's sharing with us that Cape Town could be the next biotech hub. From Nick, that the solutions are under our feet and that they are ready for business. So please reach out to Nick and to Brett if you want to continue the conversation. Zana shared with us the real impact, not only from climate adaptation, water savings, but then yield and pack out percentages, and how there is now opportunities for other banks as well as other players in the financial agri-finance value chain. So we're just going to end off now, unless there are any other questions that we have in the chat, Nikki. Just move to the next slide. A little bit difficulty there. So thank you for those of you that have completed our pre-webinar survey. We also now have a survey just to better understand whether we've delivered on your expectations this morning and how we can better support you going forward. So there is a survey that we'd like you to complete. Nikki's going to share that in the chat function, and to incentivize you to complete the survey, the WWF shop are offering you a prize. So as you can see there, it's quite a enticing prize. So we hope that that will encourage you to complete the survey. Nikki, I'm just going to ask you then to share that link on or in the chat function. So let me stop sharing my screen now so I can just see if there are any last questions that we have to take in the chat, Nikki.
Hi, Wendy. There was one question for Zan, but he's answered it. And then just to confirm, I'll be sending the survey link to everyone as a follow-up email with the presentation. So to just look out for that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. So we'll just give another few minutes to see if there are any additional questions or comments before we sign out. Thanks, Gray. Gray's just sharing with us that Stephanie Midgley is on the call and working on that drought relief he mentioned, and there she's sharing an email so Zan can reach out to her. Thanks everyone for your time today. I think let's close now. Hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and please stay connected to us. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Brett and Zan.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.